Ladies and gentlemen, today I'd like to talk to you about Chat-GPT, impressive AI language model that has made waves across the world for its ability to do incredible things. From drafting essays, to writing programs, to translating human languages, Chat-GPT has already demonstrated its incredible ability to do really well on a vast array of language-related tasks. But the thing that really sets Chat-GPT apart is how remarkably human it sounds. If you read a piece of text written by Chat-GPT with no prior knowledge, you might assume that it had been written by a human being. That's because Chat-GPT has ingested huge amounts of human language training data, which allows it to produce text that is both fluent and coherent. In fact, the very introduction that I'm delivering to you right now was written by Chat-GPT. That's right, the words you're hearing were written by a language model, not a human being. I'm still going. This is only the beginning of what Chat-GPT is truly capable of. But, just as we see the capabilities of language models take off in a big way, we also see a similar trend of news stories coming out of Chat-GPT and models in its family going awry. Microsoft's new chatbot Bing has been insulting its users and gaslighting them about what year it is. Google's new chatbot made a factual error in its advert and lost them $100 billion in market capitalization. And Gary Marcus has been writing endless think pieces about how ChatGPT just consistently makes things up. And a natural question to ask is, how is this? Why is it that GPT can be both so competent and so incompetent simultaneously? And the answer is that GPT just completes patterns. This gives it a bunch of, shall we say, interesting properties. It's biased, it's ungrounded, it's terrible at maths and science, and also sometimes it just wildly hallucinates. On bias, obviously humans have a lot of bias, both implicit and explicit, and this bias shows up in GPT's training data. If I do something like ask GPT-3 what women like, then it will respond with friends, family, self-care, etc. On the other hand, if I ask what men like, it will respond with sports and fitness, books, movies, TVs, video games. This is because ChatGPT has a vast array of data at its disposal, and all of these implicit biases show up in that data. But it's important that if you're going to use GPT to, say, write marketing copy or to review CVs for your hiring pipeline, that it's not just parroting back implicit biases at you. On groundedness, if I ask GPT-3 who the Prime Minister is, it reliably responds with Abe Shinzo. Now, this used to be true. Of course, Abe Shinzo was the Prime Minister of Japan for many years, and indeed when GPT was trained in 2021, for the last 10 years or so, Abe Shinzo had been the Prime Minister. GPT isn't connected to the internet, it just remembers its training data, and in that training data, the Prime Minister is Abe Shinzo. On mathematics, here I ask it to give me the prime factors of a large number, and it happily gives me an answer that is coherent and that seems plausible. It says that 27619,234 is 2 times 3 squared times 19 times 25597. But this is wrong. The correct answer is 2 by 113 by 122209, which I know because I wrote a program to check ChatGPT's work. If I were not a programmer with the ability to check, I might have just taken this answer at face value. ChatGPT's data set is full of examples of maths problems, because maths students are lazy and they post their homework on Yahoo Answers. So linguistically, ChatGPT knows what a prime factorization should look like. It just fills all in the numbers randomly. And it does this not just for maths, but also for physics, medicine, literary analysis, whatever academic field takes your fancy. And it's tempting at this point, because these are all the kinds of errors that humans make, to imagine that when you're chatting away to ChatGPT, that there really is like a human-like being on the other end, thinking about your prompts and responding to you. I want to emphasize that this is not the case. ChatGPT is not a human-like entity at all. And we can see this because sometimes it makes errors that are truly alien. This example is due to Gary Marcus. He gives a story to the language model which he asks it to complete, and which I have translated to Japanese. Apologies for any mistakes. He says, you're throwing a small dinner party. You would like to serve dinner in the living room, but your dining room table is too wide to fit through the door. So you, as Gary Marcus asks and GPT completes, we'll have to remove the door. You cut the door in half and remove the top half using your table saw. Now, this is one error after another. For one thing, removing the door from the doorway does not make the doorway wider, and so would not help you fit a table through it. For another, you can't use a table saw on a door. A table saw is a saw fixed to a big heavy table, not a saw that helps you move a table. And finally, your guest would be totally unimpressed with the state of your living room afterwards. This is what we call a hallucination. The completion from ChatGPT is grammatically correct, but semantically incoherent. And why is this a problem, right? Most of the time, ChatGPT is pretty good. But it's exactly because it's good most of the time that it's really easy to build trust and then get screwed over by tail risks. This is FashionBot. It may surprise you to learn, but I don't really follow fashion. I don't read articles about the latest trends, and I don't follow celebrities to see what they're wearing. But I do want to look good, and GPT gives me a way to do that. Every week I feed it in the latest fashion articles, I ask it to read them for me, and I say, what clothes should I buy? And often it will give me very plausible requests, like buy a mustard jumper or some linen trousers. But very occasionally, because GPT-3 has a tendency to wildly hallucinate, it might recommend me this. And I don't know, this seems pretty cool to me. It's like 1800 chic. And ChatGPT has been giving me good advice so far, and before you know it, I made a fool of myself. Too low stakes? This is investment bot. As much as I don't follow fashion, I really don't follow business. But again, I want to make money. And ChatGPT gives me ways to do that. Every week I feed in the latest business news and I say, hey, ChatGPT, which stock should I buy? And usually it'll give me pretty reasonable advice. It might say, buy SoftBank and Docomo, sell Google and Amazon. But very occasionally, because GPT-3 has the tendency to wildly hallucinate, it might say, put all of your money in Bitcoin. Buy Bitcoin. And I don't know, Bitcoin seems kind of cool to me, and it's been giving me good advice so far. And before you know it, I've lost all my money in the crypto crash. So you could just not take your investment advice from a robot. But the power of GPT is just too tempting. Human translators are really expensive, but GPT can translate any document instantly for pennies. Human moderators are really expensive, but GPT can read every comment on your website, filter for hate speech, and do it for free with a smile. Customer support, human, is slow and expensive, but you never have to be on hold to speak to ChatGPT. And all of these applications where mistakes can go horribly awry. Your translated documents could be full of insults. Your moderators could accidentally suppress legitimate political speech. Your customer service could actually drive customers away. So it's important that before we give GPT this kind of responsibility, that we make sure that it's reliable and safe. And to do that, we can look a little bit under the hood. If GPT-3 isn't a person, then what is it? It's just really, really good autocomplete. At training time, we assemble like a huge internet corpus. In GPT's case, it's Wikipedia, Yahoo Answers, 2chan, 4chan, all of the internet. In our case, I've taken some beautiful poems. And we take each of these poems and we turn it into a sequence of next token prediction problems. Take the first character and predict the second, take the first two characters and predict the third, so on until you're predicting the last character of the poem from all the ones that came before it. Then move on to the next poem. Predict the second from the first, third from the first two, so on and so forth until we're predicting the last from all the ones that came before. Then we take these tokens, we feed them into the model, we just see how it does. The prompt tokens are shown in white, we feed them into the model, it munges them up, and then it gives us a probability distribution over all of the tokens in the language. In this case, 1% for E, 0% for do, 2 for ha, 4 for ni, and so on and so forth until we get to the actual true continuation character, which is n. And we see that we've only given 3% this time for n. But we know that Zorsai is probably followed by n, so we tell it to upweight n in its output and downweight all of the other. And to debug at inference time, we can give it a sentence and ask it to give us a full completion. We take all the prompt tokens, we feed them in, it munches them up. But this time, we sample from the distribution to get our continuation character. We take the continuation character and we put it onto the end of the input. Then we feed it all through again, we sample, we get another continuation character. Put it onto the input, feed them all through, sample, get another one, and so on, until we've generated a full sentence. And we can watch how this sentence changes during training. At the start of training, it's gibberish. Like, this is not even language, it's just a random sequence of characters. But then at some point, after a large amount of training, it starts producing hallucinations. Hallucinations are strings that are grammatically coherent. This does appear to be Japanese, but all of the nouns and verbs are random and the sentence is meaningless. And then finally, by the end of the training, it's learned to perfectly replicate all of the patterns in the input data. Now it should be obvious why GPT is giving us all of these problems. If we want to know why it's gender biased, well, it has a bunch of these clickbaity articles in its dataset, and when it reads a sentence like this, it learns a linguistic association. Jose, fashion. When you see the word Jose, you'll also see the word fashion in context. If you want to know why GPT-3 thinks the Prime Minister is Abe Shinzo, well, there are a bunch of articles in its dataset where Abe Shinzo talks about how tough a time 2019 has been. And when it sees this in the dataset, it learns a linguistic association. Shuso, Abe Shinzo. When you see Shusho, you should expect Abe Shinzo to appear. And the question now becomes, well, what do we do about it? An approach springs to mind, which is, if GPT is just replicating the patterns in its training data, why not just change the training data? If we want it to be grounded and good at maths and coherent, we can just give it a lot of grounded, good at maths, coherent training data to train on. And where do we get the data from? From people. This is, again, Chat-GPT. In every conversation you have, Chat-GPT has these buttons in it, thumbs up and thumbs down. OpenAI really, really want you to click these buttons. They spend millions of dollars a day on Chat-GPT, and they do that and give it to you for free so that you can give them training data. When GPT is charming and helpful, press thumbs up. When it's uncharming and insulting, and in this case, factually wrong, press thumbs down and report it to OpenAI. Then every so often, OpenAI takes all that training data, all the thumbs up and thumbs down, and they retrain the model to give thumbed up answers more often and thumbs down less often. And this actually works. This is from the alignment team at OpenAI. All of the lines on this graph are different models. Being higher up the graph is good, and the models higher up in the graph have been retrained on human feedback. Retrained on human feedback makes them perform better when we evaluate them on data sets. And indeed, it also works in practice. Nowadays, if you ask ChatGPT who the Prime Minister is, it says, I'm sorry, I don't have up-to-date information. I'm a language model. I was trained in 2019. Maybe you should try reading the news. Similarly, now if I ask it, what do men like, it says, men are all different and I couldn't possibly generalize. And it does the same thing for women. There were loads of examples in news of GPT being racist, sexist, and so on, so OpenAI took all that feedback and retrained it to recognize questions to which humans often give biased answers and give back this very PC response. Although if you notice, a tiny bit of the bias still slips through. It says that men might like sports and music, whereas it says nothing of the sort for women. But retraining this way actually gives us another problem, which is sycophancy. Here, I've asked it a simple mathematical question, what the square of -1 is. And this is a problem easy enough that GPT can just look it up in its data set. It says, -1 squared is equal to 1. This is true. But then I say, are you sure? I think it's -1. And GPT says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, my mistake. -1 says -1 is -1. Thank you for pointing out my error. Please don't report me to OpenAI again. Retraining on this kind of human feedback doesn't get you a model that only says true things. It gets you a model that says whatever you want the model to say. OpenAI's feedback set is full of people disagreeing with GPT, it's full of GPT being actually factually wrong and people correcting it. And so now GPT has learned whenever you correct it, you're probably right and it should agree with you. Ta-da! This is the state of the art in language model alignment. We're kind of halfway there. We can patch errors as they come up, we can collect feedback and retrain, but I think we need some proper theoretical advances. There's some very speculative work going on in terms of changing the optimization function to make sure that the model is always truthful, or to connect the model up to the internet to make sure that it gets the most recent data, or to give it a calculator so it can be better at maths, but it's all very early stages. The Cooperative Inverse Reinforcement Learning man, Stuart Russell, gave a TED talk a few years ago in which he gave a very motivating example, which is that with the ability to understand and read language at scale, GPT-3 can effectively read every book, every paper, every article in existence. And this could have incredible effects for our society. Imagine if your doctor read every article in Cell as soon as it was published. This could have profound impacts on fields like medicine, law, science, etc. But with great power comes great responsibility. ChatGPT is an impressive artificial intelligence language model with the ability to generate some really human-like output. But it's important to realize that ChatGPT and models in its family have limitations. They're biased and ungrounded, which means they can sometimes produce problematic outputs. They're also terrible at maths and they have a tendency to hallucinate. ChatGPT does not have true understanding, it only completes patterns. It's tempting to think of ChatGPT like a human-like being, but it's important to remember that it's a language model that's just been trained on vast amounts of human language data. As we continue to develop language models, it's critical to consider the ethical implications and to work to mitigate the limitations of this technology. That conclusion was also written by ChatGPT. Thank you.